Everybody who's tuning in right now is here because we all love animals, right? That the whole point of this show, Vetted Out, is to educate people, make sure that we're arming you with the most important and latest and greatest knowledge to be good pet parents, good stewards of the environment. Now, all of us who love animals, even if it was for a hot minute, like when we were 5, 6, 7 years old, we're like, wow, a veterinarian, I can be an animal doctor. I can help them, I can make them better. I want to do that. And then find out that they have to perform euthanasias or end an animal's life and are like, never mind, nope, I'm checking out of that. And then here we are, two people who, for all intents and purposes, all we do is end lives for a profession, for a living. We are hospice veterinarians, the Kevorkians of the veterinary world. So, I'd like to introduce my guest, Dr. Dale Krier of Creature Comforts Mobile Veterinary Service, who is not only a dear friend, but one of the most important mentors that I've ever had, especially since I've transitioned in this realm of becoming a hospice veterinarian. I really appreciate you being with me today. This episode is called A Good Death, Navigating the Inevitable. Dale, thank you for being here today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first off, thank you, Leah. It's an honor to be here. You and I have been through some thick and thin together, and then back again, and so it's interesting. You call me your mentor. I feel the same way about you, and maybe in part because, to your point, there aren't very many of us, and we all have to stick together, support each other. One of the things I've always appreciated about you is that we're not sort of, this is my client. We're more about, I can't help this person. Can you help them? Teamwork. So I've been a vet since 1987. I think I'm in my 39th year. Started out as a traditional vet in a brick and mortar, 5-doctor practice, worked there for 10 years. Went to work one day. It was very close to April Fool's Day, interestingly, which is my
your birthday.
birthday. Correct. I had a 5-year-old and a 4-month-old, and went into work that day, and I was told that the practice had been sold to a corporation.
Yes.
We were the first practice in the state of Connecticut to go corporate. I didn't really know what that meant. I just knew that I was, or at least I didn't perceive myself to be corporate material. Went home, discussed it with my husband that evening, and went in and quit the next day. Which was
life-changing moment.
Scary. Scary is undervaluing the emotions. I was the main breadwinner in the family, so I had, in that moment, sort of said, okay, we have to come up with a new business model. I knew that I wanted to be a house call veterinarian, so it was actually kind of an easy pivot, but it took me about, I think it was 5 months to get my act together. I was literally nauseous every day. It was kind of like birthing a baby, I guess. You know, it's like that concept, and then you have to bring it to fruition. So I started a house call practice 29 years ago, and we did everything. My husband
had a van, right? What was her name?
Well, we just called her Vetty. Not particularly creative, but my van was my third child. She was outfitted for surgery, so I could go to people's homes, do spays, neuters, dental work, routine vaccines, all the routine care. But the one thing that I underestimated or hadn't recognized as a traditional brick and mortar doctor was that the experiences that I shared with families with the end of life made me recognize that no pet should ever have to die anywhere other than at home. And it was a pivotal point for me in trying to figure out how I was going to make that actually happen for families because it's so many moving parts to get to that decision. And I happened to be at a conference, gosh, I want to say maybe 10 years later, and having a conversation with a fellow veterinarian whose only work was hospice and end-of-life care. And I remember looking at her going, wow, that's like a thing. That's all you do. You're not doing routine care. You're okay with that. And it opened up my world to an entire organization of veterinarians whose focus was hospice and end-of-life care, and rocked my world in a wonderful, positive way. And here we are.
I remember when we first met, I was a mixed animal practitioner, relatively newbie grad out of veterinary school, and we bonded over the fact that we both went to Colorado State University. That's our alma mater. And I was kind of hitting a point where I was working too hard and not making enough money to even cover my bills and pay for my student loan debt, and was looking for an opportunity to be on my own and be my own boss. And I was doing acupuncture and chiro and doing a lot of in-home care. And so when it was time for most of my patients being geriatric for them to transition, it made sense that I was the one to do it. And I remember when Kathleen Cooney, who was the founder of Home to Heaven when I was in Colorado, I got to meet her and received feedback from a lot of her clients, our regular veterinary clients at the hospital who were worked with her at home, and just saying what an amazing experience it was and how that got me thinking, this is something that we should be doing more of. And then I remember I reached out to you, and you still had Veti, and you were still doing full general care. And I was like, hey, I think I'm going to do this hospice thing. And you were really transitioning and making that push more towards hospice. And you're kind of like, what are you doing? You're just a kid. Like, this is a heavy thing. And oh my gosh, are you sure you want to do this? And I said, yes. And there was our relationship born right there. And I remember we kind of talked about how to navigate this and the idea of potentially going into business together at first. And then I was like, you know what? I think to preserve our relationship, we just do what we can to help everybody. And if you can't make it and somebody reached out to you, you refer to me. And if I can't help somebody, I refer to you. And we try to have each other's backs on vacation, but nobody's backed into a corner. There's no contracts. We just do our absolute best to help as many families as we can and be there for each other and support each other. So I'm so grateful we met. Thank you so much.
Same. I kind of remember you were working for another company on the side, and you said, well, I'm so overwhelmed with some of this. Would you be willing to be part of this company and kind of help me out when just more appointments than I can accommodate? And I said, sure. And so I signed up with the company, and then unbeknownst to me, because I was licensed also in New York and I live very close to New York, instead of them giving me like your backup, they just gave me an entire like new territory. And it was just like, I'd be like, Leah, I'm getting home at 11 o'clock at night because I'm driving to Poughkeepsie. And it was just crazy.
Yeah.
And I think I stayed with them for, I want to say maybe 5 months or something.
Before I was like, no.
And then I was like, Leah, you don't need to stay with them anymore. Like, move on. You can do this on your own.
Yeah. And when I started my own practice, it's been about 11 years now. I was in a really different position than you were, because you were going from a full-time salaried position. You were, supporting children and a husband and a household. It was just me and my critters. I was married at the time, but was always financially independent. And so the leap of faith that I took didn't have that level of pressure on my shoulders that you did. And here we are now. And your practice is called Creature Comforts, and you are certified in hospice and palliative care, correct?
Correct.
And although I give you a lot of credit, the thought of going back to school gives me a little of anxiety right now. I remember when you were going through that class, and since then you have pretty much transitioned completely to hospice. So our focus is a good death, which is what euthanasia means in Greek. And I'm sure you likely agree with me on this, but the act of performing a euthanasia is not the hardest part of my job, which is what people always think. When we tell people that we're hospice vets, they get that knee jerk, like, oh my gosh, that's so terrible. Like, oh, your job must be so sad. Like, how do you do this? And it's like, actually, the act of performing a euthanasia is not so challenging, or that's not the difficult part of my job. It's working with the people.
And it's interesting because every now and then, and I actually kind of embrace it and even sort of love it. I had one, it was close to Christmas this year, and a family with their kids, and there was a 16-something-year-old young man. And after the euthanasia, and it all went beautifully, and he just looked at me and he said, "Your job sucks." And
Yeah.
I laughed because I actually love it when people open up and have that perspective, because for me it's an honor
Yeah.
to help each and every family. I have chosen this path, helping people on the worst day of their lives with their pet. Is truly, I'm just, again, honored that they allow me into their homes, into their hearts, into their space. And my job doesn't suck. I love my job.
Yeah, me too. I love my job. But I'm hoping that through education and having the discussions like we're having today and sharing with the general public, we can help people achieve a little bit more peace of mind and confidence when you are navigating end of life with your pet, to know that you're doing the right thing. There's a lot of guilt, and almost like euthanasia is a bad, dirty, wrong, terrible thing. Like, we're bad people for moving forward with ending somebody's life, rather than this perspective that we've had to master, being we're literally the Dr. Kevorkians of the veterinary world. And I can't even imagine when you first started practicing, like you said, being just a hospice vet didn't exist. Doing end of life care was part of your job as a veterinarian, but the fact that we can be fully employed strictly doing end of life care is wild. But with that is this constant uphill battle of trying to make other people and pet parents feel comfortable with end of life.
Yeah, I often feel bad that I think a large percentage of clients are reaching out to us at 3 in the morning as they're doing a Google search, hysterical, sobbing, red eyes, and looking for someone who offers our services in their area. I think you and I have discussed how people now think it's almost like Uber for pets, and it's
It's awful to be
not.
put in that position.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, people think that they just have to, find us, push a button, and we magically
Sitting
appear.
there on our couches
Yeah,
waiting for your phone call, only yours.
right.
No
and
one
I
else.
and I think it's shocking to them to find out that maybe we're actually booked up for the week and
Yeah.
can't even find time to get to them, and it's heart-wrenching to have to say that to them. Often I'm happy to, again, share other colleagues. It's I know you. I try to keep tabs on all the colleagues we have in Connecticut and New York who I can send someone their way. But yeah, it is an honor to be able to help these families who plan.
Absolutely. Yeah, the last minute emergencies, which I don't know if you ever broke down the bookkeeping on this, but I would have to guesstimate that about 90% of my income is less than 24 hours notice.
See, and it's weird because when you and I first met, I was a little surprised because I always said that to you, like they're all last minute, and you were like, no, because the company you were working for, I think people planned out in advance. I don't really know, but I just remember when you and I first became friends, I would say that to you, and you'd be like, no, I have my schedule laid out for the week or something, and I don't know if something has shifted where people are waiting longer. I think COVID kind of did that, where
Yes.
people were home with their pets, listening to every hiccup and every squeak and
Staring at 'em.
squirm and staring at them. Are they breathing? And yeah, people were at home just waiting for us to show up,
Yeah.
which actually was a lot easier then because everybody was home and we didn't have to coordinate schedules.
Yeah. And I also do think because of the pandemic, that was kind of like, I mean, we're the OGs in the Connecticut realm of hospice. We existed before some of the corporate operations that are now in the state of Connecticut. And so I think part of my problem is because like we don't do a lot of marketing and advertising as one woman operations. But these companies have really brought it to people's attention that in-home euthanasia is a possibility and that we exist. And they tend to have answering services and availability to get on the phone with somebody until, I think one of the companies, you can call them until 11 o'clock at night, if not
Yeah.
24/7. And they have all these support systems in place to help clients where I'm finding now that I think those companies are kind of getting the people who do schedule in advance. And when they're unavailable, that's when they're like, well, there's this crazy woman who has no human children and has a reputation for being a bleeding heart empath. And she'll probably come out to your house an hour away on a Sunday night. Give her a call. And so I kind of do feel like maybe that's happening a little bit more. Like I'm getting the clients who weren't preparing. Or, I mean, I do also have clients who I consult with for months on end. And then when it is time, a lot of the consulting and advice that I took was kind of a moot point because it becomes an emergency. Sometimes it truly is an emergency, and sometimes it's people just not wanting to accept it's happening.
Yeah, it's first off, I think going back to like COVID, I think with the curbside
Yeah.
accommodations that all the animal hospitals were providing and not letting people inside the hospital with their pets, people were sitting outside the hospital. They must have been, doing Google searches, and I actually have to thank all the, I guess, 20-somethings, forgive me, I don't know what generation that is, but like they were the ones who were telling their parents, like, this is a thing, it exists.
Yeah.
To your point, yeah, some of the corporate practices put the business on the map because of their advertising budgets that you and I don't have. You and I are word of mouth.
I try to hide sometimes. I'm not trying to always advertise.
Yeah.
I joke that I could be in a cave somewhere and somebody would send a smoke signal telling me their dog's dying.
Truly, it's
I can't
true.
get away.
It's true, and I think also because what you and I have is we don't have like a lot of staff in between the client and us.
Yeah.
So they all have a direct line to Dr. Leah, literally.
Literally
They
have
can
my
text
cell
you.
phone.
They have you have your cell phone. They have my cell phone. They text me. And to your point, like, yeah, I could be in Timbuktu. I actually did. You and I were just talking recently about my trip to Africa.
Yes.
And I was in Africa, and someone on a Facebook page was looking for grief support. And my name got tagged, so I happened to be checking. And the next thing I know, I'm like asking this lady to sign on to WhatsApp so I did an hour-long consult with her, grief consult, when I was in South Africa on my trip. So it was kind of like, wow, this is, and I wasn't even the person that helped them with the euthanasia.
Yeah.
I was just helping them with
The emotional
with the
support,
emotion,
the
right.
permission that people are often needing and seeking. Yeah. I had somebody who unfortunately, even though they were in the veterinary industry, make a really tough comment to me one time when I was going away with my family on vacation, and it was during COVID. I had just separated from my husband, and this person had known me for a long time. And although they're not a veterinarian, they work with techs. And I had just gotten to my family vacation, had just separated from my husband at the time, and I said, I think it was a Facebook post where I was like, oh, I'm finally away and spending some quality time with family. And she goes, wow, it must be nice to take as many vacations as you do. And it was like getting punched in the face. And I was in such a low place at that point in my life. And I was like, I just did 2 consultations on the ferry ride over to my family
Right.
vacation. And I had people, like I'm answering emails, text messages, phone calls. People are messaging me on Instagram, on Facebook. When I'm on vacation, people will call and hear my phone say, my practice is closed. until such and such date and be like, I don't care, and text me anyway. And so when that woman said that to me, and it's like, I thought you would understand more than anybody, like that we don't stop being veterinarians, no matter where in the world we are, no matter what's happening in our personal lives. I mean, you just recently had your third grandchild. I don't doubt that you communicated with a client in the midst of all that. I don't doubt that. Or that you might have even been trying to schedule somebody around before or after you went to the hospital. Like that would be no surprise to me whatsoever that that's what you would do, because we're the same person. Like this is our life. We can't separate being Dale or being Leah and being a veterinarian. It's who we are. It's part of what gets us going in the morning and as our motivation, but also it is a little bit of a double-edged sword because we struggle with work-life balance.
Yeah, and it's just you're sort of bringing back some emotional memories for me because my husband had a heart attack 2.5 years ago, and I'm literally at an appointment one second, and the next second I'm getting a phone call from my brother-in-law saying, like I was like, "Are you joking?" So I had to stop and drop everything. Get to Albany Medical Center, where my husband was a week in the coronary care unit. Meanwhile, I had, and I do remember reaching out to you for some help, and you were really generous about that. But yeah, I'm in the coronary care unit with him for a week, and people are still texting, and yes, there was a message on my phone that there was a medical emergency in the family, but. People are like, yeah, but I'm having a medical emergency,
Yeah.
and so it is very difficult to separate yourself. And I know that I have told you the only way I can get away from it is by leaving the country.
Physically removing ourselves from our practice
Right.
area. And even then, I just got back from, I do an annual trip with my dogs, my dogcation. And I was away. I couldn't physically respond to any emergencies, and I communicated with dozens of clients that week. Like there's no off duty doing what we do. But like you said, we signed up for it. There's this song by a band. I'm a 90s alt rock grunge person, Mad Season, which was a collaboration with the former lead singer of Alice in Chains. Rest in peace. But the first line of the song and the River of Deceit says, "My pain is self-chosen." So whenever I'm having a bad day and I'm like crying about how miserable and tired I am, and I skipped meals, and I didn't make it to the gym, and I couldn't walk my dogs because I'm rushing off helping. I'm like, you did this to yourself, you stupid idiot. Like you signed up for this. Like, suck it up, buttercup, and either turn your phone off and give yourself space, or, sometimes it includes a phone call to you to vent and and complain what I signed up for. And I mean, and we support each other that way, and it's priceless. I thank you.
Yeah, I think, age is a relative number, but at the age of 66, having been doing this for so long, I am working through some of my own medical issues. And the interesting thing that I have discovered, and I think it's reflective on all of us, is that I have been living in fight or flight since vet school.
Yes.
And the problem with living in fight or flight is that it screws with your digestive system, it screws with your hormones, it screws with every part of your physical being. And it may not be an issue in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, in your 50s.
It's a problem in your 40s, I can promise.
Yeah, I mean, and I think to that point, because I didn't know it was a thing, like it makes sense to me now. Like, damn, it turns your digestive system off when you're, shooting out the door.
I have more gray hair than my sister, who's 9 years older than me, and I don't doubt it's from my choice of profession. Oh my gosh. But, the whole point of this show and these types of conversations that we're sharing with the general public is because I want people to understand what our job looks like, how we help animals, and then also provide people with the education to make sure that moving forward, you aren't putting us in a position unnecessarily where we have to be in fight or flight. Because when euthanasia is left to an emergency, to get to that point, it means that the pet has to be suffering so badly in front of a family that they cannot second guess that it's time. And when that's happening, you're not going to reach out to someone like Dr. Krier or I and be like, what's your schedule like next week? You are going to want us there 10 minutes ago. Because, like I said, you can't, there's no other option than your pet is dying and they need assistance. And if you're waiting until that moment to reach out to someone like us, we've missed the ball by a long shot. And so I want to start with the fact that we are doing basics of animal care, very introductory. We talked about when you first get livestock, or you're considering it, or you're first going to bring a dog or a puppy into your house, and you're just in that, like, let's do our due diligence phase. Now we're skipping all the way to the end and making sure that when you are making this choice to bring an animal into your heart and your home, you are ultimately signing a contract to do right by them in their final moments. Because an animal's most vulnerable times is when they're having a medical emergency and when they're dying. And when, as hard as it is, as painful as it is, when you make this choice to have them in your lives, you have to be prepared for the inevitable, which is death. We're all dying at different rates and for different reasons. We can't avoid it. We cannot stop Mother Nature, but we can get ahead of her. And so that's what we want to teach people today.
And also, I want to go back to something you said earlier because I think it needs to kind of be highlighted. You brought up the word guilt, and you brought up how so many people feel guilty about making the decision. Well, number one, to your point, we've signed a contract, a covenant that we're going to love them, and when their bodies are failing them and we can't change that, we're going to give them a peaceful transition. It's to some levels out of our control, right? But guilt, if you look it up in the dictionary, you're using the word correctly if you're doing something illegal, immoral, or unethical.
Yes.
We float the word all the time about how guilty we feel, but we're not doing anything illegal, immoral, or unethical. We're trying to make the best decision for a pet at a moment in time. And I wish people would stop sort of turning themselves into bad human beings by throwing that guilt word around inappropriately, because it almost paralyzes them from making a correct decision.
Yes, and I love how you worded that, because I tell a lot of my clients that there's a very fine line between where you're almost being so proactive with euthanasia and end-of-life care for your animal that you feel guilty that you're taking something good away from them. You're taking away a nice walk in the sunshine, or a meal that they're able to eat and enjoy and digest properly, or a snuggle session. And then there's a very, very fine line, and it can get crossed in a snap of a finger, where the guilt of being ahead of the game with euthanasia, the guilt of being almost too proactive with euthanasia, becomes the guilt of knowing you waited too long and you had to force your pet to suffer in order to accept that they were dying. And I stress that to clients in every single consultation. You have the option of either being proactive and making sure that we have a good death, a euthanasia, or you absolutely are in a crisis situation and now we're dealing with dysthanasia, which is a bad death.
Exactly. And most of the conversations when clients reach out and they're describing their pet's situation, and they state very strongly that they will not let their pet suffer. And then I have to find, and I'm sure you experience this too, I have to find a really gentle way of explaining to them that you are describing suffering. Your pet is suffering right now. That's what you are describing that.
Yeah, we're there.
So exactly. And so then I find that people then change the line in the sand that they've drawn, and it's like, well, it's just a little suffering. Well, how much suffering is too much suffering? Yeah. Like they keep backpedaling because they don't want to accept that now is the time to be making plans.
Yeah, and I know when I need a vacation, when my ability to remember that people are going through a horrific situation, I kind of lose sight of that because I'm struggling. My gas tank is empty. I don't have much left, and I get impatient, and my compassion for the human goes strictly to my compassion for the animal. And not everybody has had a positive experience with me. And I know that you can agree that there's clients out there who might not have the nicest things to say about you, because that's part of being a practitioner and working with the public. And when I find myself having a hard time being careful with my words when someone's describing a pet that I know is in such bad shape, they are suffering, we're already too late, and I can't get through to these people how urgent it is, I have definitely said some things that I regret and have been cold. I had a client not that long ago who I consulted with for months and months on end, and the dog had a liver tumor, liver and or splenic tumor, one that could rupture and become an emergency at any moment. And it was a weekend. All the consulting that I did to avoid an emergency didn't matter because it was a Saturday, and they contacted me and they described the dog in extreme distress and then said, "Can you come tonight?" And I said, "No, I can't come tonight. Like, I can come right now. I'm right by your house, but our son's not here." And I'm like, "Your son's been knowing your dog's been dying for 4 months." So I was like, you either need to make the decision to have me come right now because I am available. This is an emergency. It is a Saturday. I'm like, or you need to prepare to pack your dog up and go to an ER. And the hundreds of dollars of free consulting time that I had done out the window, I wasn't going to make a penny off of these people. But I was so desperate to say, this isn't about you anymore. Like, we have a true emergency. And thank goodness I got through to them, and I'm not proud of how harsh I was, but I did, and I got there, and the dog definitely needed help. And after the youth, and the son made it, which was awesome, and got to say goodbye to her. I think I might have already had pain meds on board, which made me feel better. And then after the fact, as I'm taking the dog with me for cremation, and the family is saying goodbye, the woman said, she says, "I really didn't like you an hour and a half ago." And she was like, but I thank you now. And I was like, yes, you're right. And my job wasn't to be her friend. My job was not to make her like me. My job was to advocate for her animal when she was going through an emotional crisis and was struggling with the right thing to do because her heart was interfering with her clinical judgment. And I know you've been there. How many times have you struggled with euthanizing your own animal?
Oh, dear. And quite honestly, I was going to say, even in my own hands, in my own household, I have had crises present. So
Same.
I as much as we do this for a living, I do recognize that it can come up suddenly.
Yeah.
And it can truly be an emergency where, like, oh crap, we have to stop and drop and like do something now.
And if you didn't have the drugs on hand, if you weren't who you were, you would have been shoving your animal in a carrier or in a car and scrambling to find the first clinic that was available that could help you with an emergency euthanasia. Me too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I don't.
We're not perfect.
Yeah, I don't
No
want
one
to.
is.
I don't want to come down hard on people who in quotes wait till the last minute, because I've been that person. So I do get it, but I'll often make an analogy, and I don't know, maybe this helps people, maybe it doesn't, but we have warning lights on the dashboard of our car. Yes. And, if the check engine light comes on and it's a relatively new car, most of the time, if we're heading out of town and leaving on vacation, we can still head out of town and leave on vacation and come back and, let the mechanic do what they have to do. But when you have an older car and that check engine light comes on and you're heading out of town, you might have to rethink things.
You might not want to ignore that
and
one.
if that check engine light is on long enough and then it goes from just the red light to the blinking light, like, you're screwed.
Yeah.
So
you have a crisis on your hands and everybody's scrambling.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know when I start getting a little salty and a little jaded and a little impatient with people, I'm like, okay, vacation time. Like, physically remove yourself from your practice area. Because, we're humans. Like, we are not perfect. We make mistakes. I make a lot of them on a daily basis. But our hearts are in the right place and we're trying our best. And so an apology to any client who has ever felt as though I've been impatient and short with them and a little brutal. It's all coming from our our oath that we swore on to protect animals and advocate for them and prevent and end suffering. And I said that's part of who we are. It's ingrained in our being. Like,
Well, and the other part of it, I'm sometimes amazed. I'll go to a home and like you walk in and there's, I don't know, 7 animals scrambling, the cats, the dogs, right? And it takes all of about 3 seconds to just kind of hone in on
who the patient
who
is.
the patient is. But periodically, as I'm there with a family, usually it's for about an hour, give or take, I'll be observing the other pets in the household and I might say, "Hey, what's up with Sparky? Sparky's limping." And they're like, "Oh, no, it's just old age." And I guess, again, the benefit of being old now is that it's like age is not a effing disease. And I remind people of that because I find that a lot of people, as their pets age, and they see them limping and they see them moving slower and their appetites are off, all warning signs in my world, they're just writing it off as the aging process. And it's just like, if aging made us skinnier, I would be frickin' skinnier. And I'm not. So,
I know, damn it.
damn it. So, it's you don't just lose weight because you're old.
Yeah. It's pathology.
yes.
If something is wrong.
Yes. So it's been fascinating to me at how many of these patients who I've pointed something out in the home to the owner, and they'll call me a week later, a month later, and say, "You were right. My dog was diagnosed with condition." I had one the other day. It was kind of cracking me up on some levels, but in a house, 3 dogs, patient on the couch. After the euthanasia was done, one of the dogs came over, sniffed the deceased, walked next to me and squatted and just peed on the carpet. And I'm like looking at that, and the owners are like, "Did you just," I mean, clearly we all saw it. And has your dog ever done that before? That's odd. And all I could do is say, "Look, that is not normal.
That's a cry for help.
That is a cry for help. Please get a urine sample checked." And sure enough, the dog had a UTI. I sometimes feel like they're trying to tell me things when they're
Yes,
all like
they
scooting
know.
their butts on the carpet in front of me and like scratching. And I'm like, there's something up, people.
Yes. I have my crazy story like that and I'm sure you're like me. When we do this job, because it is heavy and it is a huge decision and we need to sleep well at night knowing we're doing the right things, I am storing in my photographic memory every time that I felt as though animals knew who I was and what I was doing, and they trusted me and they believed in me and they know way more than people give them credit for. I was helping a family with a dog that, it was one of those situations that clearly was sick. They were being proactive, and I love them so much for that. I usually tell people when I go into their homes, I don't even make it that far unless I'm pretty sure it's time for euthanasia, but I will assess them when I get there. And I do have clients that will vouch for me on this. I will not perform a euthanasia that I don't think is appropriate, one that's going to affect how I sleep at night, knowing that I did the right thing. It's rare, but I have gone to euthanasia appointments, realized that the clinical picture painted in my head via phone calls was not the same when I got there, and then recommended treatment. We initiate a plan, and we're able to sometimes buy that pet more quality time. Not more time, quality time. So while I'm consulting with this family about their dog, that it wasn't an emergency, but it could become one any moment. So we were trying to get ahead of Mother Nature. This big, robust orange cat, love a ginger cat, comes marching out and climbs in my lap, because I usually am sitting on the floor with the patient, and then starts like nuzzling me. And the whole family, and I think there was 4 family members, and they're all looking like, that cat doesn't like anybody. They don't like strangers. That cat barely approaches us. This is crazy. And I'm like, well, this cat is bonded with your dog that I'm here to euthanize, correct? And they're like, yes. I said, so the cat probably knows I'm here to help. And this is their way of reassuring all of us in this room right now. We're doing the right thing. And then I run my hand over the cat's shoulder, and I'm like, uh-oh. And I felt a tumor. And I said to the family, like, my heart just dropped. And I was like, has anybody felt this tumor on your cat before? And they're all like, what? No. That cat had what was likely a fibrosarcoma. in its shoulder. And while I'm there euthanizing the dog, we did move forward with euthanasia. I diagnosed the cat with a tumor that I had to come back and euthanize that cat. I think it was 12, 16 weeks later, and the tumor had quadrupled in size. And that cat was like, there was a vet in the house? Oh my gosh. Because that thing was indoor, outdoor, practically feral, and it marched up to me and was like, look it, I got a problem. And they did bring the cat to the vet, and they tried some palliative care comfort measures and then trusted me to help when it was time. Like,
Yeah, no, those are kind of rewarding.
yeah.
Like when you can go into someone's home and to that point a pet who normally runs when company comes or oh hey it's the vet, go into the vet's office and they choose you and they sit in your lap and they let you
Yes.
touch them and then you find
It's the best.
absolutely.
Yeah. Even
And
if it's a sad
they know.
circumstance.
I think the one that always gets me is, and you brought it up a little bit ago. People will proclaim how brilliant their pets are in life. Like, look, they catch the frisbee. Look, they sit, they stay, they hold a treat on their nose, whatever it may be. And then when it comes to death, they're like, "Do you think they know?"
It's like, yeah.
And I'm like, "Hell yeah!" And yes, all the other animals in the house know too.
Yes. When families are struggling with the decision of end of life, I will ask if they have other pets and if they're acting differently towards the one that's transitioning. And almost everyone will say yes to some degree.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's either that they're being kinder or more gentle, sniffing, checking in, grooming, nursing the one that's transitioning, or they kind of ghost them. They start acting like they're not even in the house anymore, like walking by them, ignoring them. And thankfully, I rarely see this, but you might have before where they get mean towards the
Absolutely.
one that's
Yeah,
dying when there's
I
like a
have.
hierarchy at play, and it's almost like a Mufasa Lion King scenario where they're like, "You're done here." Like go, and they can aggress the
Yeah.
animal that's dying, and everything in between. But a change in an animal's demeanor, they can absolutely smell cancer and organ failure and imminent death.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's uncanny, quite honestly, if people like open up their eyes to what's happening. And again, it's so weird when you go into someone's house. You've never been there before. You've never met them. You've never met their pets, but yet you're pointing out things that they can't see.
yes, and so a big part of being proactive and providing your pet with a good death is being prepared to identify the signs, which are very subtle, of suffering, of when somebody's not feeling well, when you need to like, okay, I got to contact Dr. Krier, I got to contact Dr. Leah. A colleague of ours, Dr. Andy Rourke, who does a lot of social media and public outreach, did a speech when his own soul dog was transitioning. And he said, owning a dog eventually leads to suffering, and that's okay. And it's true. And so when we know our animals are dying, that's when our suffering starts at diagnosis, when we know there's a problem. And then we're in the phase of anticipatory grief because you know it's coming and you're so afraid of missing the opportunity, especially if you want to be home with someone like us. Or you've got family members who you want present or people who don't want to be there. Like some people have young kids and they're like, I need to be there for my dog and I can't have my kids distracting me.